How often are you wishing for a little more peace in your life? How often are you like going, man, if I could just get a day, a week, oh, I could use a little more peace. So often we equate peace with rest and relaxation, with silence, and there is an element of peace in that. But how do we find peace? How do we practice God's peace when life is chaotic? Because situations happen all the time. We have to respond, right? We go through our day and maybe we wish for more peace, but we can't seem to just figure it out. And so for today, we're going to start in Jeremiah, the 31st chapter, verses 2-3, as we think about, okay, how do we practice peace? The Lord proclaims, the people who survived the sword found grace in the wilderness. As Israel searched for a place of rest, the Lord appeared to them from a distance. I have loved you with a love that lasts forever. And so with unfailing love, I have drawn you to myself. All right. So the Israelites head out into the wilderness, which is this great metaphor for, a place of dryness, a place where it's like unknown. I don't know where I'm going. And there they find God's grace. There they find a grace because they're looking for rest. And God's grace in this moment is all about my love is with you forever. And so it's this reassurance that God's grace is present forever. So that when they're looking for peace of going, okay, if God's grace is present with them, even in the wilderness, even when wilderness, it's not what you necessarily want it to be. It may be that you find yourself in the wilderness and things are too much of what you don't want. And there God's grace, God's love is present to bring about and facilitate peace. And so here it's like, okay, making space for God. But again, it's kind of one of those things of go, well, okay, if I need to make space for God, for God's presence, to realize God's love, to experience God's grace, but I don't have the time, right? I'm too busy. Have you ever felt that of going, well, yeah, I mean, if I had the time, I would do that. But really, I've got so many things on the list. And by the time I get finished for the day, it's well past my bedtime and I'm exhausted. And so again, that question of, okay, if part of peace, practicing peace is making space for God, how can we make space for God in the midst of chaos when things are not going necessarily our way? Because so often, right, we think of peace like certain requirements have to be met before we can experience peace. Like we have that laundry list. And so going, okay, if that list cannot be met, if we just start there, that list cannot be met before I experience God's peace, before I practice God's peace, then what does it mean to make that space for God's peace when all the criteria we have set forth, we have written down, aren't met? So to help us in that is John 14, verses 26-28. The companion, the Holy Spirit, whom the Father will send in my name, will teach you everything and will remind you of everything I told you. Peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. I give to you not as the world gives. Don't be troubled or afraid. You have heard me tell you, I'm going away and returning to you. If you love me, you would be happy that I'm going to the Father because the Father is greater than me. All right. So here Jesus is giving the disciples peace. He's like, my peace I leave with you. And he's not giving it as the world gives. Do not be troubled or afraid. And so that kind of thinking through when we need a little bit of peace in the chaos of going, wait a minute, what am I fearful of? What am I afraid of that, you know what? God's grace is way bigger and I want some of that peace of Jesus. And he's like, well, okay, we may have to set aside some of those fears, some of those things that kind of get in the way, that we create space of noticing, okay, where can I not be afraid in this moment? Where is God's beauty and God's love in this moment? And we can begin to go, okay, and we can take a little bit of a time to do that. And you may go, okay, I really don't have an hour for this. What about 15 seconds to notice the birds singing outside, to take a look at the sky, to go, wait a minute, to smile, or to receive that from a coworker who knows, or maybe the text message. And it's not just us noticing those things, but how are we creating those moments, even when we don't feel like it? What is the text message we send to cheer someone else up when we ourselves are struggling? What is the, hey, you know what? I see a bleak world around. I am going to notice, or I am going to create in this moment some beauty with the way I engage in conversation, with the way I talk about, with the way I push aside fear. Because one of those things that fear does is it actually tries to eliminate God's grace, which diminishes our ability to have peace. And so when we're thinking about the space that we create in the midst of chaos, how we cultivate peace, we can choose to be kind. We can choose to bring some beauty and love to somebody else. We can choose to notice where the beauty is lying around us. We can choose to notice God's grace of strength that didn't leave the Israelites alone in the wilderness, but instead reassured them that they were indeed loved. And so sometimes that creating space is just a momentary, almost like a mantra of saying to ourselves, I am loved by God. I was created in love for peace and joy. In this moment, God is with me. I may not exactly know how, but God is with me and will carry me through. Think about those things that we tell ourselves in those moments of the unknown, of chaos, of complicated. And are they creating? Are we attempting to create space for God, to create space for a little peace, rest in the knowledge that God is with us, that God's love goes with us, that we are not alone? May you find some peace. May you cultivate the space for God's peace today. Have a good one.